Hi, in this video we're going to get into a bit more detail about the pictures from my last vlog. Hi, I'm Adam and welcome to First Man Photography, the channel that will help you take your photography to the next level. If you haven't done so yet, head over to firstmanphotography.com, fill in your details to join the email list, and I'll send you a free copy of the ebook on how to capture perfect exposure every time. Okay, let's get into this. After shooting and uploading my last vlog where I visited Ullswater in the Lake District, many of you commented that you would have liked me to have talked a little bit more about the settings, the pictures that I was taking, the compositions and that type of thing during the vlog. Now I understand that, but for the vlogs, I really don't want to include that information in the vlog film itself because there's a story there. It's about the journey that I'm going up the mountain and capturing the scenes. It's about the weather that's happening that day. All those different story elements add to the entire story of that vlog. And I think if I started talking about camera settings and things like that, it would detract a little bit from the flow of the story during my vlog. Having said that though, I do want to give you that information. I'm not trying to hide anything. I want to share as much information with you as I possibly can, and that includes the settings and details of the photos and a little bit what I was thinking about when I was composing the shot and taking it. So I've decided to create this video, which is almost like a debrief of the photos that I captured during the vlog. I'm going to go through each photograph, talk about it a little bit, talk about the settings, what I was thinking at the time, and hopefully you will find that useful. And if you do like it, I will do this after every single vlog. Okay, so let's get into the computer and we'll start having a look at the images. Now in the vlog at the start of it, I mentioned that I'd been out shooting sort of on my arrival in the Lake District, which was the day before I shot the vlog, and I captured a couple of images. We'll have a look at those now. And this is the first one. It's of Kirkstone Pass as you come down towards Ullswater in the Lake District. Now, it's a very high road. It's really windy. It's picturesque, as you can see from the photograph. Now, I'd parked the car up a little way further up the hill, and I'd crossed the road up onto the hill that the picture is taken from to find this composition. I liked it because it has the road sort of leading you into the image here, down into that valley, and then down to this small lake at the bottom here. So I am pleased with the composition. But whilst I was shooting it, and this one is, let's have a look at what we're working with here. We've got f16 to get everything in focus. I could have probably gone a little bit lower than that, f8 maybe, f11, but there we go, ISO 100, and the shutter speed isn't particularly important because this is a HDR. My HDR video went out the other day, and this is a combination of 3 shots that are 2 stops apart, one for the midtones, one for the highlights, one for the shadows, and this is the final image that I came up with. So I had the camera set up, but then I decided that I think it would have been a really nice shot if I'd done it as a long exposure. So it was taking vehicles about 2 minutes to get from sort of down at the bottom here, where you can see the road coming into the picture, off into the distance. It was about 2 minutes roughly to do that journey along that road. So I thought it would be really nice to capture the light because it was fairly dark at this point in time, get the light trails all the way down the mountain or all the way up, and I thought that would have made a really nice image. So this is with the 24 to 70mm, and I am at 55mm, as you can see at the top here. And so I decided to run back up the hill to get my ND filter to attach to the camera in order to allow me to get that long exposure and get those trails. But this is where bad planning can really cause you some problems. And I hadn't planned the shot. It was just a last minute thing that I thought of. So I ran up the hill, got my ND filter, got back and started screwing it onto the front of the lens. And then I realized that that wasn't the right filter for that lens. That's an 82mm thread on that Tamron lens I was using here. And the filter thread was for my 77mm 17 to 40 lens. So I was just basically trying to scratch the glass of my lens and it wouldn't go on. And it's just an example of where bad planning can really affect the sort of final shot that you capture. Having said that, it's not a bad shot. I did also consider doing it in black and white, and I've done the edit of the black and white, which is here. there's certain elements of it that I prefer in black and white, but the reason I stuck with the colour is because of the lake here. In black and white, it's the lake in the distance just goes white, and that was slightly off-putting. When we look back at the colour one, you can clearly see that that's a body of water, and I'm just not sure that you can when it's in black and white. So that's why I went with the colour in the end. Let's go on to the next one. And this is the second image. This is down at that lake that we saw in the previous one. This one here, I've gone down to that, walked through the woods, got to the lakeside and taken this shot. Now, again, this is a HDR. It's a combination of 3 images, again, 2 stops apart again. And I haven't used this image anywhere. I haven't posted it anywhere. And it's not an image I'll probably use. Although I'm happy with the composition. I sort of made sure I got these little rocks in the water in the foreground. I've got the nice reflection there. A little bit of interest in the sky, not as much as I was hoping for. These clouds cleared a little bit away from this mountain here very briefly. But the reason I am not happy with this shot is this glow around the top of the mountain here, or this hill here. And I mentioned that in the video the other day, and you've really got to be careful with that. It's unavoidable here. I couldn't get rid of it. I probably could if I went deep into Photoshop, did some selections, things like that, but I don't have time for that. And I'd rather at some point go back and try and capture the image when there's different lighting conditions. So although I'm pleased with the image, I'm pleased with the composition, I won't be using that because of that glow along the contrast line here. I also did a long exposure of the same shot, which I'm not sure if I prefer or not. I really don't know. But again, this is just one image, this one. And let's have a look at what settings I used on that one. So I'm at 17mm, ISO 200, f8. That last one was at f16, just to make sure that I got those stones in focus. It's probably a little bit of overkill, but I've gone for f16 anyway. F11 would have been probably fine. On this one, I've gone for f8 with an ISO of 200. Normally, I would do all my landscape photography at ISO 100 to get the cleanest possible image. But the reason I've gone up to 200 here is because I was doing a long exposure. I think I had a 10-stop ND filter on there. So here I've gone for f8 and ISO 200 because otherwise my exposure time would have been too long. Here it's 129 seconds, which is just over 2 minutes. And that was about all I wanted to spend on this image. So if we go back to that full screen, you can see it's not a bad image. You've still got a little bit of that glow though in that contrast line between the darker area here and the lighter area here. Again, not a bad shot. I'm not sure which one I prefer. This is a good example though of the dynamic range of the Canon 5D Mark IV. So there's elements of it that I'm really pleased with, but I just don't think I'm going to share this image. It's more likely that I'll go back and capture it on another day. Let's move on to the next one. So I'm just going through this as sort of in a chronological order of how I captured them in the day on the vlog. This is that double rainbow that you might have seen in the vlog. If you haven't seen the vlog, I will link it up here for you to check that out. Probably best that you do check that out first so you know what I'm talking about here. So actually when I set the camera up for this, I couldn't actually see that. I couldn't see with my own eyes that it was a double rainbow because I'm concentrating on filming, I'm concentrating on getting this set up, and I just went ahead and took the shot. So it was a beautiful rainbow. It was framed nicely by these trees, which is where I set up. This is Ullswater Lake in the background because that adds an element of sort of position and interest and context to where I've taken this photo. I'm pleased that I've got the mountains in here, and then I've managed to capture a little bit of detail in the cloud. There's a few spots of blue pushing through as well, which I think adds to the image as well. I would have liked a little bit more blue in that sky, but obviously I'm not in control of the weather, so that's what we have here. I would have liked to have found a little bit more interest in the foreground, but you can only work with what you've got. That was a composition for me. I think it's still a half decent shot, and that's about that. I've then started walking up the hill to try and capture it higher up, because ideally I would have been higher up for this one, but I've started running up the hill, and this was the image I captured. I haven't processed this as much as I would normally because this shot became the time lapse. I'll put the time lapse on now so you can see that. really pleased with this time-lapse. I've got to say, normally I find it hard to be pleased with my own work sometimes. I'm very critical of myself, but I was really pleased with this time-lapse. But the rainbow had started to fade, so it wasn't quite as bright as it was in that previous image. But happy with that one. Happy with the composition. I like the difference between almost getting the full arch of the rainbow in the previous shot and then just having half the rainbow in this one, because I wanted to get that mountain in it with a contrast with the rainbow. But you can see a bit more of the lake in this one, which is what I liked as well. And then that incredible light coming through the clouds, and you've got the shadows, and it just made for that time lapse. So let's move on to the next one. So this is the next shot, and I've called this sheep and the mountain. Let's have a look at the settings I've used. So ISO 100, 70mm, so I could get as close to that sheep as possible from the path that I was on. And I've gone for f16 to make sure I get that sheep, which is relatively close to me, and that mountain in the background in focus, because that's what I wanted. It would have been interesting to try a lower or a bigger aperture where the background is blurred out a little bit. That might have been interesting, but I didn't shoot that shot. And then I've gone for 1/100th of a second. This is handheld, so I'm quite comfortable hand holding at 1/100th of a second, and I've just used that shutter speed to balance my exposure. So let's take a closer look there. And I like the shot because it's got this beautiful light coming down here and hits, almost isolating the sheep there as he's surrounded by a bit of shadow. I like the sort of shape of the hill here, and that's what I wanted to capture, almost framing that stream in the background with the mountain in the background. I'm happy with this one. The really interesting lighting, shadows from the clouds on the mountain in the background. So yeah, I was pleased with that shot, and let's move on to the next one. So this is when I'm at the top, and if you've seen the vlog, it was extremely windy. So I wasn't going to set my tripod up for these shots. So I just went round at the top taking some handheld shots. And this is where a lot of people are just going to start taking snapshots. And there are elements of this that are a snapshot, which I'm just stood there at the top taking a shot. But it's where always thinking about your composition is going to result in you getting better shots. So as you can see, I've sort of gone with the top of the mountains at the top of that rule of thirds line, and then this rock here was just really interesting, and I wanted that to sort of point your attention down into this valley where you've got the stream running all the way along the bottom. And I'm pleased with the image, particularly when I show you what I started with, and because it was a very windy, there was lots of cloud rushing around, and this is the original image. So like you can see, if you just saw that, you might think almost that it's a snapshot. But when I took it, I had black and white in mind because I wanted to boost that contrast. There's interesting tones in the rocks at the front here. There's interesting tones with the light here. And then you've got the shadows at the front here. And that's why I went for the black and white in the end. Brought some detail out in Lightroom in the clouds as well, which I think it's resulted in a really interesting image towards the end. It's my shot. I'm not perfectly happy with it because of the conditions. I was hoping for a little bit more when I got the top, but I think I've done there as best as I possibly could have done. Again, let's have a look at the settings on that one. I'm at 70mm, f8 because there's nothing really that close to me, so I can maximize the sharpness of the lens with f8, and then I'm balancing the exposure with 1/250th of a second. And let's have another look at that one. So this cliff here is quite a lot closer to me than these ones here, and it's also in shadow, so I've boosted the shadows quite a bit in this area just to get the detail out of that. And then you've got this really interesting sort of valley, well, this really interesting mountain with this stream here and everything leading down into that center area of the frame. I've got the top of the mountains along the top of that rule of thirds line, working on my composition. It's not an amazing image, but I think as part of the story that I was telling, it gives you a good idea of where I was stood. So this is the image that the whole point of the vlog was about in the first place. So I knew I'd been sort of seen this area before. I knew that was the shot I wanted to capture in a kind of sunset scenario. So I didn't know that rock was there. I went down there, picked the composition, and I've used this rock here as some foreground interest, and you've got these little jagged rocks here as well. So I feel like that this rock is leading you into the image. There's lots, that beautiful sunlight on the sort of grass and the rock there. And as you can see from the vlog and the video that I did the other day about sunset photography, that this was a HDR. So there's 3 images here. One exposed for the midtones, one for the highlights, and one for the shadows. And I'll show you the original images in a minute, just to explain, or just to really highlight that again if you haven't seen that sunset photography one. But again, what I'm doing with my composition here, like I said, I've got foreground interest, and then I've used this stream here to lead as a leading line to lead you into the center of the image here, where I've got this tarn, and that tarn with the light coming through the clouds was really what I was wanting to capture, with these really impressive mountains either side, and that was the whole point of the shot. I'm pleased here that I do have a little bit of blue in the sky, because if that was all grey, I think it would detract, or the sky would be much less interesting. But we've got in the sky, we've got the blues, we've got the grey of the cloud, and then this sort of golden sunlight. Let's have a look at the originals. That one is exposed for the mid-tones, that one for the highlights, so you've got the detail in the sky there, and then that one for the shadows there, so you're bringing that detail out in the foreground. If we just go back to the mid-tones, you could use that image by itself if you're shooting in RAW to drag out details in the shadows, drag out details in the sky, but there's no way you could produce that final image just with using a 2-stop graduated filter, because it's such a big range of dynamic light there that you've got the sort of brightness here in the foreground where the sun rays are hitting it, but then this area behind this mountain is really dark. You've got the bright highlights in the sky, so there's lots going on, which is why I think in this circumstance bracketing and HDR was the right way to go for me. So let's skip through them, and then on the way down I sort of took this image. I was going down to get a sunset with that tarn, but the cloud came over, spoiled that shot, so I just grabbed this shot of this waterfall very quickly. Let's have a look at the settings on this one. ISO 100, f16. I don't know why I went for f16 on that one. I was in a bit of a rush when I was shooting this one. It wasn't a particularly pleasant place to be. It's quite a big waterfall. I had to get across that river as well, so I was rushing a little bit at this point, but I grabbed this image quickly, and it's a ½ a second exposure. That's without any filters. That's just using the sort of dim conditions. Maybe I used the f16 to get the exposure and to make the shutter speed a bit longer to really capture the movement in the water there, as you can see. I'm not a massive fan of these waterfall shots, but it's sort of part of the day. It's part of the story that I'm telling, and it's not a bad image overall. And this image, again, on its own, not a great image, but I'm happy with it because it's part of the story of my day. And as a photographer, shooting vlogs and photos and things, I just want to be a storyteller. I want to put that story across of the day with video, with pictures, and that it's always about the story. And this little hut, it's deep in this mountainous region. There's no road running up to that. It's a long walk to get back to sort of civilization from this hut. It was in use this day. It's not always, but you can sort of you can use it, and it had a family staying in it, which has just added a little bit of interest because the shutters are open. There's a fire roaring inside with the smoke coming out of the chimney here. Like I say, not my favourite shot. It's certainly not going to win any competitions or anything like that, but adds to the story of the day. And that's the last image. So I hope you enjoyed that. I hope you don't feel it was too self-indulgent. That's really not what I'm going for. I'm just trying to give you a little bit more detail about all the shots that I captured in the vlog and let you know the sort of thought process I'm going through, show you some of the settings as well, and let me know if you like it. Leave a comment down below so I know whether it's worth the time to do these videos. Do you appreciate it? Is it helpful? Do you find value in it? So let me know. I really need to hear from you on this one if you could be so kind. Like the video as well if you do, and subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already for videos every Wednesday and every Sunday. And there's definitely become a much bigger push around landscape photography recently because it's just what I love. But I'll see you on another video very soon. I'm Adam. This is First Man Photography. out.